In the small, quiet town of Willowbrook, there was an old, abandoned circus that had been left to rot for decades. Legend had it that the circus was cursed, haunted by the spirits of clowns who had once performed there. Locals whispered stories about eerie laughter echoing through the night and flickering lights in the distance. Most dismissed these tales as mere folklore, but little did they know, the horrors that awaited them were very real. One gloomy October evening, a group of curious teenagers decided to explore the abandoned circus grounds. Ignoring the warnings of the town's elders, they ventured into the decaying big top, their flashlights casting long, menacing shadows on the tattered circus posters that still clung to the walls. As they stepped inside, the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. Unbeknownst to them, the spirits of the clowns awakened from their slumber, sensing fresh souls to torment. The teens roamed the circus grounds, their laughter masking the fear that lurked in their hearts. Suddenly, the flickering lights overhead burst into life, revealing a circle of grotesque clown figures standing in the shadows. Their faces were painted with garish smiles that seemed to stretch unnaturally, their eyes hollow voids of darkness. The teens froze in terror as the clowns began to close in on them, their oversized shoes squeaking eerily with every step. One by one, the clowns lunged at the terrified teens, their laughter echoing through the empty circus tent. The air was filled with the smell of grease paint and decay as the clowns' twisted grins widened with sadistic pleasure. The teens tried to escape, but the clowns were relentless, their movements unnaturally fast and agile. As the night wore on, the once curious teenagers were reduced to mere playthings in the hands of the malevolent clowns. Their screams reverberated through the empty circus grounds, unheard by the outside world. The spirits of the clowns reveled in their torment, feeding off the fear and despair of their victims. Meanwhile, in the town of Willowbrook, a sense of unease settled over the residents. The night seemed darker, the wind carried whispers of long-forgotten nightmares. A brave few ventured towards the circus, drawn by an inexplicable force. They arrived to find the abandoned big top alive with flickering lights and echoing laughter. Inside, they discovered the gruesome scene, the lifeless bodies of the teenagers, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. The clowns, satisfied with their night of torment, faded back into the shadows, their sinister laughter lingering in the air. From that day on, the town of Willowbrook was never the same. The circus became a place of dread, its cursed reputation etched into the memories of the townsfolk. Children would dare each other to approach the circus gates, but none would venture inside. The once bustling town now had an air of melancholy, a reminder of the night the clowns had claimed their victims. And so, the legend of the haunted circus lived on, a cautionary tale whispered from one generation to the next. The memory of those terrifying clowns served as a chilling reminder that some horrors were not meant to be explored. For once you stepped into the darkness, there was no escape from the nightmare that awaited within. In the small, quiet town of Willowbrook, there was a deep-rooted fear that gripped the hearts of its residents. It wasn't the fear of darkness or the fear of the unknown. It was a fear that struck at the very core of their souls, the fear of clowns. The town had always been home to an annual circus, a tradition that had been celebrated for generations. However, something sinister had happened in the recent years, something that had turned the innocent laughter of children into terrified screams. It started innocently enough, with a new circus arriving in town one fateful summer. The circus was called Carnival of Fears, and it promised an experience like no other. The moment the circus tents were erected on the outskirts of Willowbrook, a strange sense of foreboding settled over the town. The posters that announced the arrival of the circus were adorned with menacing clowns, their painted smiles concealing something malevolent beneath. As the night of the grand opening approached, whispers of the clowns' eerie behavior began to spread like wildfire. People claimed to have seen them wandering the streets of Willowbrook after dark, their colorful costumes now tainted with the darkness that seeped from their very beings. Children started to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the echo of their terrified screams. The townsfolk, once enamored with the circus, now avoided it like the plague. But curiosity and fear are strange bedfellows, and some couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. One such person was Emily, a young girl with a heart full of bravery and a mind hungry for adventure. One moonless night, Emily ventured to the Carnival of Fears, her steps muffled by the thick fog that clung to the ground like ghostly fingers. As she approached the circus grounds, she noticed a flickering light emanating from one of the tents. Heart pounding, she cautiously entered. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp canvas and mildew. The flickering light led her deeper into the tent, where she stumbled upon a room filled with mirrors. But these were no ordinary mirrors. They reflected distorted images of clowns with elongated limbs, sharp teeth, and empty, hollow eyes. Emily gasped and tried to turn away, but the mirrors seemed to trap her gaze, holding her captive in their twisted reflections. Suddenly, the room echoed with a sinister laughter that seemed to come from all directions. The mirrors began to warp and twist, and the monstrous clowns within them started to seep out into the room. Emily screamed and tried to escape, but invisible hands seemed to pull her back, keeping her within the clutches of the haunted mirrors. Outside, the town of Willowbrook was plunged into darkness as an ominous storm gathered overhead. Thunder rumbled like a warning from the heavens, and lightning illuminated the night, revealing the ghastly shadows of clowns dancing on the streets. The townsfolk, paralyzed with fear, watched in horror as the clowns multiplied, their numbers swelling with each passing moment. Back in the haunted room, Emily's screams mingled with the cacophony of laughter as the distorted clowns closed in on her. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a figure emerged from the shadows, a mysterious old woman with eyes as sharp as daggers and a heart burdened with ancient knowledge. With a voice that resonated with power, the old woman recited an incantation that sent shockwaves through the very fabric of reality. The mirrors shattered, releasing Emily from their clutches, and banishing the malevolent clowns back to whatever twisted realm they had come from. The storm outside reached its peak, unleashing its wrath upon the carnival of fears. Lightning struck the circus tents, setting them ablaze, and thunder roared like a vengeful god. The clowns, once so terrifying and powerful, were reduced to nothing more than ashes and fading echoes. As the first light of dawn broke, the townsfolk emerged from their homes, their faces pale with the remnants of fear. The carnival of fears was nothing but a smoldering ruin, a reminder of the horrors that had plagued their town. But they were free, and in their hearts, they knew they owed their newfound safety to the bravery of a young girl and the wisdom of an old woman. From that day on, the town of Willowbrook banned all circuses and carnivals, fearing the return of the clowns that had once haunted their streets. The tale of the Carnival of Fears became a cautionary legend, a story that parents whispered to their children to keep them safe at night. And so, the town of Willowbrook remained quiet, its streets empty of clowns and laughter, haunted only by the memories of a nightmarish circus and the courage of those who had faced the greatest fear of all, the fear of the unknown. In the small town of Ravenbrook, there existed an old, abandoned circus ground that had been forgotten by time. Legends and stories whispered through the wind, tales of the cursed clowns that once performed there. The circus, known as Cirque de l'Obscurite, had been a spectacle of nightmares, filled with clowns whose smiles were too wide, eyes too hollow, and laughter too sinister. One foggy October night, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to investigate the abandoned circus. Among them were Sarah, a fearless young girl with an insatiable curiosity, Mark, the daredevil who never turned down a challenge, and Emily, the skeptical yet adventurous bookworm. They gathered at the edge of the woods, the eerie silhouette of the circus looming in the distance, silhouetted against the pale light of the full moon. As they ventured deeper into the circus grounds, the air grew colder and heavier. The atmosphere seemed to vibrate with an unsettling energy. The creaking of rusted metal, the distant echoes of laughter, and the smell of damp earth filled the night. Unfazed, Sarah led the group towards the big top, her flashlight illuminating the path ahead. Inside the big top, they discovered a maze of abandoned tents, each adorned with faded colors and torn fabric. The ground was covered in a layer of dust, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew. Strange symbols and drawings of menacing clowns adorned the walls, as if the very essence of fear had been painted onto the canvas of the circus. Suddenly, a soft, eerie melody floated through the air, sending shivers down their spines. The teenagers followed the haunting tune, which led them to a small, dimly lit tent at the far end of the big top. As they entered, they found themselves surrounded by antique clown masks, their painted expressions frozen in eternal grins. Mark picked up one of the masks, his fingers tracing the contours of its exaggerated smile. A chilling gust of wind swept through the tent, extinguishing their flashlights. In the darkness, they heard the muffled sound of footsteps, soft laughter, and the rustle of fabric. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone. A flickering candle illuminated the tent, revealing a circle of clowns dressed in tattered, colorful costumes. Their faces were hidden behind grotesque masks, each one more terrifying than the last. The clowns began to dance in a macabre rhythm, their movements jerky and unnatural, the room filled with their laughter, a cacophony of madness that echoed through the night. Terrified, the teenagers tried to escape, but an invisible force held them in place. The clowns' laughter grew louder, echoing in their minds like a never-ending nightmare. The masks on the wall started to twitch and contort, as if possessed by a malevolent spirit. One by one, the masks floated towards the teenagers, forcing itself onto their faces. As the masks attached themselves, the teens felt an overwhelming surge of dread and despair. They were no longer in control of their bodies. The clowns had taken possession of them. The once fearless Sarah, daring Mark, and skeptical Emily were now transformed into twisted, malevolent versions of themselves. Under the influence of the cursed masks, they began to perform a horrifying dance, their movements grotesque and inhuman. The clowns' laughter reached a fever pitch, blending with the anguished cries of the possessed teenagers. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist around them, creating a nightmarish spectacle that defied explanation. Outside the tent, the moonlight cast eerie shadows, giving the illusion that the circus itself was alive and breathing. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, as if the spirits of the cursed clowns had been awakened from their slumber. The town of Willowbrook fell under a sinister veil, plagued by inexplicable nightmares and unshakable fear. The legend of the cursed circus spread far and wide, a cautionary tale whispered by parents to their children. The abandoned grounds of Cirque de l'Obscurite stood as a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked within the world of clowns, a reminder that some fears were not meant to be faced, for they could consume the very essence of one's soul. And so, the tale of the cursed clowns became a harrowing legend, a story told in hushed tones around campfires and in the dead of night. The abandoned circus grounds remained untouched, a grim reminder of the night when the laughter of clowns turned to screams, and the innocence of youth was lost to the darkness. In the small, unsuspecting town of Willowbrook, there was an eerie legend that whispered through the winds and chilled the hearts of its inhabitants. It was a tale that had been passed down through generations, a dark story that seemed too terrifying to be real. The legend spoke of a traveling circus that had visited the town decades ago, a circus that brought with it a troupe of malevolent clowns. The circus, known as Cirque de l'Obscurite, arrived in Willowbrook on a moonless night. Its arrival was silent and swift, like a shadow creeping over the land. The townsfolk were initially excited, their curiosity piqued by the colorful posters that adorned the walls, promising a night of unparalleled entertainment. However, little did they know that the clowns that emerged from the circus's depths were not ordinary performers. These clowns wore twisted smiles that stretched unnaturally wide across their pale faces, their eyes hollow and soulless. Their laughter, a cacophony of madness, echoed through the night, sending shivers down the spines of anyone who heard it. As the townspeople gathered under the big top, they had no inkling of the horror that awaited them. The circus began innocently enough, with dazzling acrobats and fire breathers captivating the audience. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly ominous. The clowns, with their grotesque makeup and oversized shoes, started to perform acts that transcended the boundaries of reality. They contorted their bodies in ways that seemed inhuman, and their laughter became increasingly deranged. As the townsfolk watched in horrified fascination, the clowns began to exhibit strange and terrifying powers. One clown could manipulate shadows, making them dance and writhe on the walls of the tent. Another could conjure illusions that twisted the minds of those who gazed upon them, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Soon, chaos ensued. The clowns' malevolence knew no bounds, and they began to torment the audience, pulling them into a nightmarish carnival of horrors. Some were chased through the maze-like corridors of the circus, their screams drowned out by the manic laughter of the clowns. Others found themselves trapped in mirrors, their reflections mocking their despair. Outside the tent, the once peaceful town of Willowbrook was plunged into darkness. The night seemed endless, the moon and stars obscured by a thick, black fog that seemed to emanate from the circus itself. The few brave souls who attempted to escape the nightmare within the big top were met with a fate worse than death. The clowns, their faces twisted into sadistic grins, hunted them down with relentless determination, dragging them back into the madness. Days turned into nights, and the once vibrant town of Willowbrook fell into a state of perpetual fear. The streets were deserted, the buildings abandoned, as the malevolent laughter of the clowns echoed through the empty alleys. Those who had managed to evade capture lived in constant dread, their sanity hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, inside the circus, the clowns reveled in the terror they had wrought. They had become more than mere performers. They were embodiments of fear itself, feeding on the anguish of their victims. The circus, once a place of wonder and entertainment, had transformed into a nightmarish realm, a purgatory where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred into nothingness. The legend of Cirque de l'Obscurite and its terrifying clowns spread far and wide, a cautionary tale whispered by parents to their children. Willowbrook became a ghost town, its name synonymous with unspeakable horror. The circus, with its cursed performers, vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving behind a town scarred by the memory of that fateful night. To this day, the tale of the malevolent clowns serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary things. And somewhere, in the shadows of the world, the circus waits, its eerie laughter carried on the wind. A warning to those who dare to forget the legend of Willowbrook and the terrifying clowns of Cirque de l'Obscurite.